Hello, Blazer fans. Welcome back to another edition of the Blazers Edge Videocast here on BlazersEdge.com. I'm Sam Tung here with Dave Decker. We are talking some more LaMarcus Aldridge today. If you missed our last videocast, we talked about the Kevin Love LaMarcus Aldridge debate, and here an opportunity to talk a little more LaMarcus Aldridge. And this question coming from CSC 808. I'm not sure of the 808. Might be a zip code or an area code, maybe, Dave.
Yeah, but the zip code is a couple of numbers short, but
yeah, but area code potentially.
I
probably should have looked that up before we got on video. But anyways, the question from CSC is: with the current labor agreement in place, what are the chances LA signs an extension? Seems he gets more if he actually becomes a free agent in July of 2015. Can't think it too likely he gives another discount. Only upside being if he signs this summer, then he has an injury. He still has 4 more years. Downside for the Blazers is go through an injury-plagued season, win just 42 games, and he still may walk. So the question here, Dave, is what do you do with LaMarcus, or what should LaMarcus Aldridge do? If you sign now, you have the money and it's done. But if you wait and something happens next season, it may diminish your value.
Well, it would have to be a pretty serious injury, I think, to diminish his value, and catastrophic, because he's just come off probably the best season of his career, and he's ensconced himself among the league elite, not just for power forwards, I think, but for players in general. He may not be number 1 or number 2, but he's certainly in the conversation of the top dozen or so. So I'm not sure he's worried as much about injury right now. I think the dividing line comes between the needs of the Aldridge versus the needs of the Blazers. And they're kind of opposed right now. The Blazers should want to sign him now for a few reasons. Number 1, obviously, it keeps him out of free agency, and they can plan going forward. Number 2, it's going to be cheaper for them. They save money, and that's a big consideration, of course, for the franchise profitability. I'm not sure it'll affect the salary cap too much because they got a bunch of other players to sign, but still, cheaper is better. And if you have a chance to get a guy now and for less money, that's much better than later with the risks inherent in it and more money. Aldridge, on the other hand, has zero incentive to sign now, save for any goodwill he might have toward the team. And even so, you cannot expect him to sign early and for less money. He's already under the maximum contract. He signed a less than max contract in his last deal, letting Brandon Roy, of all people, in his view, take the max, and Roy ended up being amnestied. So now it's LaMarcus's turn to get paid. You cannot expect him to say, no, I don't need that much money. I don't need the extra year on my contract that would come from waiting. I don't need the leverage that would come from waiting a year. I'm going to give up money and all of that in order to make you guys happy. That hasn't always been reciprocated in this relationship, and it's certainly not a quid pro quo for a guy of his talent and caliber. So I don't see any way that Aldridge has any incentive to sign now. All the chips are on his side of the table, and his hand says to wait.
Yeah, and as you said, I think that people forget that the NBA is a business, and the players of the NBA, the employees, the majority of their money is from their contract. That's where they make their money. And if you're a guy like Marcus Aldridge, there are other players like Damian Lillard, like LeBron, like Derrick Rose that have these big endorsement deals that they do have those, but LaMarcus doesn't have near the endorsement deals that any of these other guys do. I think, though, that, as you said, the ball is in his court. He's the guy that you have marketed as the all-star. He is the guy that you have said this is the star player. He's the guy that's the last player introduced at the player introductions. He is the player that, and we've seen it too even this season, when he isn't in the lineup, there is a very big impact on the way that this team plays for all reasons, statistically, on the court, off the court, marketing, everything. The entire business question, or kind of all these business reasons lead up to him waiting until he can make the most amount of money. And quite honestly, he deserves it, because as you said, he's the guy who took less money, or ended up taking less money in his last contract. He's the guy now that the league really looks at as the elite power forward, one of a couple. And at his position, he is the stretch four. He's like a natural stretch four. He fits into what the NBA is going into currently, and it just makes a whole lot of sense that his style of play really matches what the NBA is going to anyway. So, I mean, there's, as you said, it's almost like not only will he be selfish, but he probably should be selfish in that way, because all the roads are leading towards him waiting and getting the most money that he really deserves at this point.
Well, the key phrase you said in there, or the key name, was Damian Lillard. You know the Blazers are going to max this kid, and they're probably going to max him for the rest of his natural life. So if you are Aldridge, you can't look at him and say, well, you're going to give the max to Dame, but I will take a little less to be a good team player and what have you. Now, obviously, Aldridge's max is higher than Lillard's max because they're at different points in their careers. At the same time, Aldridge didn't get that when it was his turn to be the younger max guy. He has to step up. Plus, if you're LaMarcus, you have to have in the back of your mind, I'm giving up flexibility as well. Obviously, he probably wants to stay with the Blazers at this point. It seems like the wind is blowing that way. But the wind was blowing the other way last year, and it only takes one season for that wind to change. You got to remember that you are locking yourself in for the next 4 years instead of waiting a year and getting a bigger contract, right? And keeping that flexibility open. So if things don't progress for the Blazers, LaMarcus still has options next year that he will be giving up if he inks that lesser deal now. Why in the world would you do that? Even if you love the team. You figure, I love the team because it's doing well. If it's doing well this year, it's going to do well next year, so what's the difference? But if it doesn't do well, hey, I can still get my money somewhere else, and I still have the ability to make those choices. I don't see why he gives that up for... even if he loves the organization, there's just no percentage in it, personally, or, again, if you feel like the organization is going to do great, you just look at him and say, hey, we're going to do great next year too, so let's sign the deal then.
And there's, as you said, there's no guarantee. But the one argument, Dave, and I think that, as you said, it would have to take a catastrophic injury or something crazy would have to happen. But if you are a guy in the NBA, and you have an opportunity to take the money, and it's not a great analogy, but a similar case would be do you stay in college and wait an extra year and you might end up being able to cash in some more, or do you just take the money now? And I do think that there is an argument for just the overall theory of, and I know it's not a great comparison like I said, but I think the overall theory of taking the money as soon as it is available, I don't think it's a bad idea. Is it as good as the alternative? Probably not, but I do think that you can at least understand taking the money up front in an effort to, basically it's an insurance policy for you. Your insurance policy is what am I going to be giving up on the back end, but at the same time then you have the max deal, you're doing the extension, you know where you're going to be, you know how it's going to work, the organization loves you, it's going to be all lovey-dovey in the media, and I think that there might be some percentage of thought that needs to be put to something like that.
Yeah, except that insurance policy works both ways. When you're a young athlete, you're not thinking that this year I'm going to get injured. And frankly, again, it would have to be a catastrophic injury for Aldridge not to get the max next season. If he tweaks his ankle or, stretches his hamstring and misses 20 games, who cares? He's still going to get maxed. His legs would have to fall off before he would be able to demand anything less. However, which is more likely? That he's going to get injured sometime this year to such a degree that it's going to affect that next contract negotiation, or he's going to get injured sometime in the 4 years between now and when that extra 5th year of his deal would come due that he could get by signing next summer instead of this summer. And if he gets injured in any kind of chronic way in the next 5 years, then that 5th year is not going to be as much as he could have gotten in the summer of 2015 had he waited. And basically that's a mid-8-figure salary or to high 8-figure salary that he would be giving up in that year. I think if you're looking insurance, it's far more likely that you're going to be injured over the course of 5 years to the point that renegotiating that contract at that higher amount won't give you the max than it will be that you're injured in the next 12 months so that you won't get the max on the end of that initial deal. So I hope I explained that well, but basically insurance to me says you go and play through the next year, make sure that 5th year is guaranteed at the maximum amount because you're never sure that you're going to be able to sign for that amount if you get a shorter contract and have to renegotiate then when you are older and perhaps your body has worn down.
And I think here, and just to wrap this thing up, Dave, I know I agree with what you're saying, but I think that part of the deal here is LaMarcus is acutely involved with another player, and we've already talked about him, the guy that got amnestied, that took that money, you know, and a guy that he was going to get maxed out anyways. But I think that he was so uniquely involved in that situation that it has to cross his mind. It's not to say that he's going to take it more seriously than the alternative, but you know, I'm just curious if that even does cross his mind because he has seen a situation where taking the money was more important. And even Damian Lillard's co-star at Adidas, that's another guy who took the money as soon as he possibly could, and now it's really paying off too. So I think that there is some reason to take some concern, but I'm in agreement with you. I think that it makes the most sense for him to just wait. But I would be curious sort of what his thought process is going into something like that. And that's
yeah, I mean it is what it is, but I would give a 95% chance that Aldridge will hold off, and that the Blazers, you know, everybody thinks, okay, it's a fait accompli, they're going to sign him next summer. I would put a lesser than 95% chance on that. I'd say, you know, at this point it looks like there's an 80-85% chance that he will re-sign. But a lot of things can happen in a year, and what happens if the Blazers get in the first round and lose next year? Or an injury happens to another player and they kind of drag their feet? Or, you know, if you look at the Minnesota Timberwolves a few years ago, who peaked at the Western Conference Finals and were never the same after. You look at Memphis, who went to the Western Conference Finals last year and came back down. If the Blazers have a similar arc where it looks as if that second-round appearance against San Antonio, in which they got crushed, is their plateau, I don't think it's guaranteed that Aldridge re-signs, which is all the more reason for the Blazers to want to do it now, but all the more reason for Aldridge to want to wait. And if he does re-sign, I think cheers go up in Blazer land. You should applaud that guy big time, but you cannot expect him to do it. No reasonable human being, I think, would put their self-interest that far back.
And that's going to do it for us here on the Blazers Edge Videocast. Send those emails in, blazersub@gmail.com, the same way that CSC did here today. And that's going to do it for us on the Videocast. For Dave Deckard, I'm Sam Tung. Again, thank you for joining us here today. We will be back in a couple of days answering another one of your questions, so we will talk to you then here on blazersedge.com.